The year was 1878, and the New Mexico Territory was a crucible of dust and fire. The sun, a malevolent eye in a bleached sky, hammered down with a relentless, bone-dry intensity, baking the very marrow from your bones. My name's Caleb Cole Thorne, and I'd faced my share of hardship. Blizzards that froze the marrow, stampedes that flattened everything in their path. But this vast, shimmering emptiness was different. It gnawed at your spirit. I was alone, leading my cantankerous mule, Old Bess, laden with a prospector's meager haul, a few ounces of silver, a pouch of low-grade lead, and a mountain of exhaustion. Every breath tasted of grit and the distant elusive scent of pine. For 3 days, that prickling sensation on the back of my neck had been a constant companion. The desert, usually a symphony of stark, beautiful silence, now seemed to hum with an unsettling, predatory quiet. Broken twigs lay where no animal should have stepped. Faint, almost invisible tracks appeared and vanished in the shifting sand, and the sudden, chilling absence of birdsong screamed a warning. These were signs I'd learned to read like a preacher reads scripture, signs of the Apache. My old Winchester rifle, its stock worn smooth against my shoulder, felt strangely light in the vast, indifferent landscape. I ran a thumb over its cold metal, a small comfort. I was pushing hard, driven by a primal urge to reach the relative safety of Fort Sumner, a distant speck on the horizon. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic, desperate drumbeat. I pictured my younger sister, Lila, back east, her face framed by soft curls, and the desperate promise I'd made to send her enough to buy a decent life. That image propelled me forward. Then the whispers in the wind turned into a guttural roar. A sudden gust brought with it the undeniable scent of wood smoke, thin and acrid, mixed with something else, the raw, primal smell of horses and unwashed bodies, a scent of impending confrontation. Shadows, long and lean, detached themselves from the hidden arroyos, flowing like water, swift and silent as desert wolves. Riders, Apaches, they materialized from the very earth itself, their forms blurring against the shimmering heat. Their war paint, stark black and vermilion, seemed to suck the light from the air, and their eyes, even from a distance, burned with a cold, unforgiving fire. There must have been 20 of them, maybe more, circling me like a flock of hungry vultures. Old Bess bucked, braying in absolute terror, sending my meager supplies, coffee beans, dried jerky, a few rusty pans, scattering across the dust-choked ground. My hand instinctively went to my rifle, my fingers slick with sweat, but I knew, even then, it was useless. They were everywhere, a living, breathing wall of fierce, painted faces, their ponies kicking up plumes of angry red dust that choked the air. The lead rider, a powerful figure with a single, perfectly balanced eagle feather tied into his long, dark hair, raised his hand. Chief White Wolf, they called him, and his gaze, even as he bore down on me, was unnervingly familiar, stirring. A half-forgotten memory. They disarmed me with brutal efficiency, their hands quick and unyielding. My Winchester, my trusty Colt peacemaker, even my worn Bowie knife, all gone, tossed into a pile. I stood there, hands raised, framed against the blinding glare of the sun, the scorching light reflecting off the polished steel of their spearheads. The dust, disturbed by their horses, settled slowly, thick and gritty, coating my tongue, filling my nostrils. The air was electric with tension, a suffocating blanket of unspoken threat, silent except for the nervous snorting of their ponies, and the frantic, almost painful thumping of my own heart against my ribs. I saw the glint of their dark eyes, the taut muscles under their buckskin tunics. They were poised, eager, their bodies radiating a raw, untamed power. I closed my eyes for a fraction of a second, picturing the quick, brutal end, a silent prayer. For Lila on my lips. Then a sudden, vivid memory erupted through the fog of fear, not a memory of a fight, but of a different kind of encounter, one shrouded in the haze of a moonless night almost 7 years ago. A desperate, chilling night near the Gila River. a young Apache warrior, bleeding out from a gunshot wound to his leg, left for dead, abandoned by a careless detachment of scouts I'd been trailing. I'd found him, a boy, barely a man, feverish and delirious, his breath ragged, whimpering in a language I didn't understand. My own canteen was dangerously low, but I'd shared what little water I had, dribbling it onto his cracked lips. I'd torn strips from my own shirt to staunch the flow of blood, tended his wound with the rudimentary knowledge I possessed, and left him hidden in a shallow depression under a thorny mesquite bush, with a few strips of dried venison and a hushed warning to stay low. It was a foolish, reckless risk, something that could have gotten me killed by other settlers who wouldn't understand, but in that moment, seeing the terror and pain in his eyes, I'd simply done it. I hadn't known his name then, only that his life was slipping away as Chief White Wolf, his face a chiseled mask of stone, rode his war pony closer, looking down at me from his elevated position. My gaze met his, and in his eyes I saw it. A flicker, a subtle, almost imperceptible recognition. It was a tremor in his otherwise stoic demeanor. "White Wolf," I said, my voice hoarse, cutting through the heavy silence like a blunted knife, "you owe me a life." The words hung in the oppressive air, heavy with unspoken history, an audacious claim against a formidable leader. The warrior. On the chief's immediate right, a young man with a fierce, scarred expression shifted impatiently, his hand tightening on his spear. But White Wolf raised a hand, a silent command that froze his movement. His dark, piercing eyes bored into mine, searching, remembering, delving into the depths of a shared, unlikely past. A profound stillness settled between us, a quiet recognition in the heart of the wild. White Wolf dismounted, his movements fluid and powerful, a predator in his element, yet with a surprising grace. He walked slowly around me, his gaze never leaving my face, studying me with an unnerving intensity. The other warriors remained utterly still, their weapons poised, their eyes narrowed slits under the stark lines of their war paint. I felt the scorching heat of their collective scrutiny, the raw, palpable tension that crackled in the air, a taut wire that could snap at any moment. My mind raced, reviewing every detail of that long-ago night, preparing to justify my audacious claim. "You speak with a bold tongue, white man," White Wolf finally said, his voice deep, guttural, betraying no discernible emotion, yet carrying an undeniable authority. "A life? Many lives are taken on this land, many debts unpaid. Speak the truth, or speak your last words." He stopped directly in front of me, so close I could feel the heat radiating from his body, his eyes now narrowed, searching my very soul, demanding an accounting. "Gila River," I pressed, my voice gaining strength, resonating with conviction. "7 summers ago, a young warrior, left for dead near the Big Bend, shot in the upper thigh. You were feverish, delirious." I looked directly into his eyes, forcing him to meet my gaze, to remember. "I found you, used what little water I had in my canteen, shared it to cool your fever, tore strips from my own shirt to stop the bleeding, wrapped your wound, hid you from the cavalry patrols passing through the next morning, from men who would have scalped you without a second thought, left you with dried venison, enough to last a few days, and a warning to stay low, to heal." The memories rushed back, vivid and sharp, cutting through the desert haze. The boy's desperate gasps, the raw fear in his eyes, the metallic tang of his blood on my hands, my own gnawing thirst, the internal debate, the moment of decision that felt both foolish and profoundly right at the time. White Wolf's eyes widened, just a fraction, a barely perceptible tremor. A flicker of something, perhaps deep understanding, perhaps grudging surprise, crossed his stoic face. He turned and spoke a few sharp, guttural words in Apache to the young warrior at his side, the one who had shifted impatiently earlier. This warrior, his features strong and proud, looked at me with an intense gaze. Then slowly, deliberately, a flicker of recognition in his own eyes, he nodded to his chief. It was a silent, powerful confirmation. Nietzsche turned back to me, his expression still unreadable, but the air around us had shifted. The palpable tension, while still present, was no longer a threat of immediate violence. It was a heavy, expectant silence, a knife-edge balance between an ancient code and a singular, undeniable truth. I could almost hear the thoughts of the warriors around us, their impatience for a resolution, their curiosity piqued. But this, I knew, was a matter solely between me and their chief, a debt of honor hanging in the unforgiving desert air. The silence stretched, agonizing, broken only by the mournful cry of a distant hawk circling high above. Finally, White Wolf spoke again, his voice a low rumble, but now with a subtle undertone of something akin to grudging respect. "You risked your life for one of my own, white man. A foolish thing, many would say, for a man of your kind to do for an Apache. But a debt is a debt even across the divide of our peoples." He paused, his gaze sweeping over his warriors, then back to me, holding my eyes. "My son tells me it was so. He remembers the water, the hidden place. He remembers the kindness you showed." A ragged sigh escaped my lips, a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. The suffocating tension in the air, though still palpable, subtly, undeniably shifted. He walked to his horse, a powerful, dun-colored mare, her coat the color of dried earth. With a fluid, unhurried motion, he reached into a leather pouch hanging from her saddle and retrieved my dusty canteen, then my Winchester. He didn't hand them to me. He tossed the canteen to me. It landed with a soft thud in the dust, surprisingly still full, a silent offering of sustenance. Then, with deliberate care, he laid my rifle and Colt Peacemaker gently on the ground beside it, followed by my worn Bowie knife. He gave no direct command, no gesture for me to pick them up. It was a test, a silent, profound acknowledgement of trust, a fragile bridge built on a single shared moment of humanity. My fingers, still gritty from the dust, trembled slightly. As I picked them up, slowly, deliberately, my movements precise, my hands steady now. I didn't meet his gaze, but I felt the immense weight of his decision, the profound honor of his action settling over me like the vast, silent sky. "You may go," White Wolf said, his voice flat, yet carrying immense authority that seemed to resonate across the vast, empty plains. "Your life is returned to you, the debt is settled. But do not forget this day, white man. The desert has many eyes and many memories. We are not so different, you and I, when faced with the harshness of this land. Remember what you have seen, what you have felt." He mounted his horse, his movements fluid and powerful, the embodiment of a warrior in his element. With a slight, almost imperceptible nod, a gesture barely visible against the setting sun, he turned. His warriors followed, a silent, disciplined phalanx, their figures blurring, melting back into the shimmering landscape as swiftly and mysteriously as they had appeared, leaving behind only the unsettled dust and the echo of their departure. The silence they left in their wake was absolute, but it was no longer menacing. It was peaceful. I stood there for a long moment, the sun still beating down, casting long shadows across the red earth. The dust was still gritty in my mouth, the heat still oppressive, but the air felt profoundly different now. Lighter, a crushing burden, one I hadn't even realized I was carrying, had been lifted. The fear, the desperation, the gnawing certainty of death, all of it had dissipated, replaced by a quiet, overwhelming sense of grace. I picked up my scattered supplies, the coffee beans, the dried jerky, the rusty pans, feeling the weight of each mundane item, each one a testament to the life I had just been given back. Old Bess, my mule, still trembling slightly, nudged my hand, her soft muzzle a comforting presence. The encounter had left an indelible mark, not just on my memory, but seared into my very soul. I had faced death, and in that barren, unforgiving place, I had found life in the most unexpected of ways, through a forgotten act of kindness, a shared moment of humanity that transcended all cultural divides. As I mounted Old Bess and resumed my journey towards Fort Sumner, the sun dipping below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery streaks of orange and crimson, a deeper respect for this harsh, beautiful land and its ancient, resilient people settled within me. The desert did indeed have many memories, tales whispered on the wind for generations, and today it had added one more to mine, a profound memory of a debt honored, a life given, and the powerful, often invisible threads that truly bind us, all even across the deepest divides of culture, conflict, and circumstance. My silver watch was long gone, a relic of a time when I measured existence in ticks and tocks, but I carried something far more valuable now, a renewed sense of purpose, a deeper understanding of the vast, complex human landscape of the American West, and the undeniable truth that sometimes the greatest treasures aren't found in gold or silver, but in the echoes of shared humanity that resonate across the most unforgiving of plains. I was no longer just a prospector. I was a man who had faced the true wilderness both outside and within and found a new path.